Welcome home, hunters, to the Bloodborne the board game tutorial. Bloodborne the board game is a cooperative action-adventure game for 1 to 4 players. It's based off a video game of the same name. To start setting up the board game, we're going to need to pick a campaign. In the base game, there are 4 campaigns to choose from, but each expansion will offer at least one other campaign, and each of these campaigns have their own unique stories and challenges that the players will have to overcome. Each campaign is broken up into 3 chapters, and each chapter is a single tabletop session, give or take 1 to 2 hours, based on the number of players. There is no specific order to the campaigns in the game, so you're free to choose whichever campaign you would like to face. Once you start one campaign, you must see it to its completion, win or lose, as the hunters you select will acquire upgrades over time. However, those upgrades are only contained within that campaign. So let's take one of these campaigns and show you how to set it up. We're going to need the large hunt board and place it off to the side somewhere within viewing distance of all players. Then we take the campaign deck here off to the side and we can read the top card, which is the introduction. This will provide some story context as to what the campaign is about. After that, we'll see some chapter setup cards. When looking at a chapter setup card, at the top we'll see enemies, below that we'll see tiles, and below that would be any special rules that might pertain to that specific chapter. Now, these campaign decks are organized in numerical order, and there will be many cards within this deck that refer to revealing other specific cards. However, there are enough cards in the deck to offer a bit of variety, and there are branching paths and decisions that hunters will have to make over the course of the campaign. When setting up a chapter, you'll gather the required enemies and tiles depicted on the chapter setup card. And if your chapter setup card has some special rules at the bottom, those will need to be pulled out first, as those rules may augment how you set up the game or how that chapter is played out. First, we'll gather the monsters depicted by the setup card. If your chapter setup requires you to gather random monsters, then you'll take your collection of monster cards, shuffle them, and randomly draw monsters until you have the required number of random monsters. Once you have acquired all your monsters, shuffle these and even give them a few flips, because these monster cards are double-sided, each side showing different behaviors to offer even more variety to every session. So, we'll take our monsters, flip them around, shuffle them, and randomly place them onto these 3 enemy spots. Each of these spots will show these monster icons, which will appear on tiles as we draw them throughout the game, and will designate which monsters are spawned on which nodes. This also depicts the order in which the monsters activate, from left to right. If over the course of your chapter, new monsters are spawned, they'll be placed off to the side, and the order will remain left to right. Now that our monsters have been selected and placed on our board, we can gather their appropriate miniatures and place them off to the side. Once we have the appropriate monsters, we'll need to gather the appropriate tiles. The tile that will always be used in every game will be the central lamp. We'll take this tile, put it face up within the center of our play area, as this will be where our players will start off. Then we take the rest of the tiles and search through them until we found the tiles designated by the chapter. At the bottom, there's also a symbol here which represents the number of hunters or players. So I'm going to set up for 2 players. Therefore, I'm going to need 2 times 2 random tiles to a maximum of 6. This is done by first setting aside the required tiles for your chapter, and then from all other remaining tiles, shuffling those and randomly drawing the required number of random tiles. All other unused tiles can be returned back to the box. Then we take our random tiles and the tiles called out by our chapter setup, take those, shuffle those together, and this will be our tile deck. Set this off to the side so that it can be drawn from when we are ready to play. We then have a hunt round tracker, placing that on the first spot here. Once this gets to the end of the track, that will signal the last round of the game. And if the hunters cannot complete the chapter before that happens, they will lose. And if you fail to complete any chapter, you have failed the entire campaign and must restart from chapter 1. We can then shuffle and set aside our upgrade deck and draw the top 4 cards and place them each of the upgrade spots of the Hunter's Dream. We can then take the consumables deck, shuffle that, set it off to the side, and then take the deck of rewards, make sure that they're face down. This doesn't need to be shuffled, but can be set off to the side of the consumables deck. There are 6 enemy action cards, which can be shuffled and placed somewhere nearby, as these will need to be drawn very often throughout the game. All the tokens can be organized and placed off to the side. With that, the campaign is set up, and then we can flip our chapter card to the mission side. We'll talk more about that after we set up our hunters. To set up a hunter, each player is going to need to take a hunter dashboard and the matching colored miniature base ring. Then each player will need to select a hunter. Hunters are identified by their unique trick weapons. Each trick weapon is a double-sided dashboard, which each side showing different abilities and attacks. Simply select which trick weapon you would like and place it on the side of your choosing onto your hunter dashboard. Then find the appropriate miniature and slot them into the colored base ring. Each hunter also starts off with a specific sidearm, so find the sidearm which matches your hunter and place it onto your dashboard with its ready side face up. Each hunter is also going to need a standard starting deck comprised of 12 basic cards, 3 of each type, 3 endurance cards, 3 vitality cards, 3 skill cards, and 3 strength cards. It should also be noted these should not be shuffled into the skill upgrade deck beside our hunt board, as these are basic cards and are only used for a hunter's starting deck. Shuffle these cards, place them off to the side, and draw 3 to make up your starting hand. You don't have to keep your hand secret, as this is a cooperative game, so it might be helpful to have your cards in front of you so that you can discuss strategy with your other hunters. Once the campaign and the hunters have been set up, each player will then take their miniature and place it onto any space of the central lamp tile, a space being divided by these white lines. And with that, you're ready to begin. The first thing players are going to want to pay attention to is the missions card of their chapter. It'll usually have you reveal a card from the very start and will show when other cards get revealed during the chapter. So here it asks us to reveal card 1. This card will have a hunt mission. It will describe why the players are out on the hunt tonight, what's their purpose, and how to progress that mission. Now, each chapter will have a single hunt mission and possibly multiple insight missions. Hunt missions are required to complete the chapter, while insight missions are more like side quests that can provide helpful rewards for the hunters to become stronger. Not only do they provide immediate benefits, they also will tell more of the story and may influence future chapters. Like I said, I'm not going to go into too much detail as I don't want to spoil anything for you, but imagine that our main hunt mission is to deal with some threats. Over the course of the game, we might find a side mission that says we might need to help somebody, or perhaps kill someone. Completing these missions will provide some benefits, but we might see these people again in future chapters. And if we were amicable towards them and helped them before, they might be more helpful later. But as I said, time is of the essence. There's only so much time the players have to go around completing missions during each chapter. So sometimes you may not be able to do every mission you would like, or perhaps it might force you to make certain decisions where if you had the time, you would do something else. Be sure to look at each chapter mission card to ensure that you do not miss the opportunity for when these cards are revealed and new missions might appear. When you finally complete a mission, you'll get something known as an insight card. These cards will have a name, rewards, and flavor text to describe the end of that mission. These cards need to be kept as they are the evidence that you completed a certain mission. And when future missions ask whether or not you completed a certain mission or made a certain decision, these are the cards being referenced. Plus, whenever a mission refers to having a number of insight, it's referring to those insight cards. This mission here says we need to have 2 insight, which means we need to find and complete 2 insight missions in order to progress our main mission. As soon as the main mission is complete, the chapter is complete and we are successful. But if we allow time to progress and we cannot complete the mission by the end of the last round, that will mean we fail. So, ignoring anything that we see here, I'm going to teach you now how to play the game. So to play Bloodborne, each game is broken into rounds, and during each round, every hunter will get a turn, and after each hunter's turn, enemies will activate in response to them. So, for example, we'll say the purple hunter here will perform all their actions. Once they finish their turn, enemies will activate. Then the green hunter will perform all their actions, and then enemies will activate. Once all hunters have completed their turn, the round will progress, and we'll move our tracker 1 step forward. The order in which the hunters take their turns is up to the hunters. One round, the purple hunter can go first. The other round, the green hunter can go first. But a hunter must take their turn to completion before the next hunter can go. So, if we look at our player aid here, it describes what actions our hunters can take. I'll split them into 2 categories: combat and not combat. There is only one combat action, but the way that it's performed is very different from the other actions, and so that's why I'm going to split up the 2. Otherwise, if you're performing a non-combat action, you need to take a skill card in your hand and discard it to a discard pile beside your skill deck and declare which action you are performing. For example here, I discard this card and say I'm going to perform the move action. So, I'll take my hunter and I can move up to 2 spaces. When I move my hunter through an alleyway off into a new space, I will need to reveal a new tile. So we'll draw the top tile off the tile deck and place our tile so that it has a connecting alleyway. Once we do that, if there are any monster icons on that tile, we need to populate them with the associated monster on the hunt board. And then there's a consumable icon here, which means we'll need to place a consumable token onto that spot. After you populate the tile, you'll take the first step into that tile, and then you can continue your movement. However, you cannot, for example, move 1 space, perform an attack action, and then complete your movement. You must take your full movement action to completion before performing another action. So this hunter could take their second point of movement and move back. However, anytime you move out of a space or tile that has a monster, that monster will pursue that hunter 1 space towards them. This movement is done after finishing the move action. So for example, let's say our purple hunter was right here and they performed their move action and they moved 1, 2 spaces away. They finished their move action, and during that move, they did move out of a space or tile that had a monster. So that monster will pursue them 1 space towards them. The second action a hunter can perform is to interact. By discarding a card, they declare that they're doing the interact action, which means they'll interact with every interactable object in their space. This could be treasure chests, levers, or any other specific token or significant space as indicated by your mission cards. When interacting with a chest, you simply discard the consumable token and draw the top card from the consumable deck. These provide helpful one-time use items, which you can, by the way, have an unlimited amount of. So if you have the time to pick them up, do so. Another caveat with the interact action is that if you interact on a space where there are monsters, they will get to resolve a free attack on you, and you will not get to react to this in any way. They are not initiating combat, so you do not get to attack them back or dodge in response. You simply have to survive the attack, and then you can complete the interact action. The other 3 actions you can perform are combat, transforming your weapon, and going to the hunter's dream. These 3 will require a little bit more explanation. So to initiate combat, I need to be on a space with an enemy monster. Then I need to take a card in my hand and declare which attack on my trick weapon I'm going to use against this monster. Each attack has a speed and a damage value, indicated by these arrows and these blood drops. The more arrows, the faster the attack is. The more blood drops, the more damage it does. Naturally, each side of a trick weapon also has a special ability at the top. But let's go through the motions. By declaring an attack and placing my card onto the trick weapon, I am filling that slot, which means that slot can't be used again until I clear it through some means. Also, whenever I place a card onto a slot like this, I will immediately perform any actions or receive any benefits that appear on that card. Here, this basic vitality card allows me to draw one. So I will take the top card from my skill deck and place it into my hand. After the player declares their attack, we then need to see what the monster will do. We'll take that enemy action deck that we shuffled before and draw the top card. This will refer to one of the behaviors on the enemy's card, either their basic behavior, special, or ability. It should also be noted that in this enemy action deck there are 3 basic cards, 2 special cards, and 1 ability card, thereby adding to the strategy if you can calculate what behavior your enemy will perform. So once the enemy's behavior has been revealed, the player then has an option to declare a dodge. If they want to dodge that attack, they need to use a card that has dodge on it and place it onto an open spot on their trick weapon that is either the same speed or faster than the attack incoming. So here, the Huntsman minion is going to perform a speed 1, 3 damage attack. So I can use this basic dodge to dodge at the same speed or at a faster speed, which means I have officially dodged that attack and will not suffer any damage or other effects. And because I placed a card onto my trick weapon, I will also receive any benefits on that card, and it says to clear this slot, which means this slot is now cleared and is open to a new card later on. So I declared my attack, we saw their action, I declared my dodge, and now we kind of run through the timeline. First, at the highest speed, speed 3, I will do 1 damage to him. And then at speed 1, he would do his action, but I dodged it. And that is 1 combat round. I can continue to perform actions until I run out of cards in my hand or choose to stop performing actions. You may want to stop performing actions early so that you still have some cards in your hand to react to enemies activating after you. Once a hunter declares that their turn is over, enemies around them will activate. However, the only enemies that activate will be enemies on the same tile or 1 tile away from their tile. Now this means 1 tile adjacent. For example, let's say we had a tile like this, where although these tiles are next to each other, they are not adjacent because the passageway from this tile does not connect to an open passageway on the other, as this black border around the tile is an impassable wall. Therefore, this tile is not 1 space away, and this monster would not activate. But if we had this monster 1 tile away from our hunter, they would move 1 space towards our hunter and then attack them or initiate a combat round if they were on the same space. This means that they also ignore other hunters who are not the hunter who just activated. For example, if we had a green hunter here and the board was set up as such and purple just activated, this means our monster would go towards the purple hunter but would not attack the green hunter. But if they manage to reach our hunter, then they will initiate a combat round which plays out exactly the same as when our hunter initiated one. This means that our hunter has the ability to declare an attack followed by revealing the enemy's action, declaring a dodge, and then resolving the timeline. Nothing happens at the higher speeds, but at speed 1, I'll perform a deadly thrust, and the huntsman would perform their lumbering swing, but because I dodged it, we could ignore that attack entirely, and I will follow through with my deadly thrust, which does 4 damage, thanks to the benefits of this card, meaning that we will have done 5 damage, which is our monster's health here in the top right. When a monster dies, simply take their model off the board, and then give the hunter who struck the final blow a blood echo. These are used to purchase upgraded skill cards, and each hunter is limited to a maximum of 3 on their dashboard. So you're going to need to spend them so that you don't let blood echoes go to waste. I should also note that, let's say for example I didn't dodge that attack. That means at speed 1 I would do deadly thrust and they would do lumbering swing. These attacks happen simultaneously, meaning I would have done 4 damage onto him, and at the same time he would have done 3 damage onto me. Each hunter only has 6 HP, which can make them seem very fragile. So you're going to need to play smart with combat. Naturally, let's say our monster here had 2 health remaining, and I declared that I was going to do the Quicksilver shot here, which has a speed of 2 and would have done 3 damage. And we draw this basic card, which means that they would have been at speed 1 with 3 damage. My attack would happen first, meaning I would apply damage onto the huntsman, and they would die before they even got to perform their action. But while we're talking about combat, we can talk about some special effects. The most important one being stagger. Stagger is incredibly useful in combat because stagger will completely cancel out attacks that are slower than it. If we use this same example here, if I declared that I want to do a Quicksilver shot at speed 2 and give it stagger, it means that if our huntsman minion here did their lumbering swing attack, it would mean that my action would be performing first. I would do 2 damage onto them and then completely cancel out their attack, meaning that I don't need to declare a dodge and waste a card from my hand to do so. But I have to be banking on the fact that my attack is faster than his, or that he's not performing an action that says it cannot be staggered. So be sure to pay attention to all the information on the board to know when is the perfect time to use certain cards over others. Some firearms can even stagger certain enemy attacks, and when you use a firearm, you flip it over, meaning that it is exhausted. In order to refresh it, we will need to look at the refresh requirements on that card. But now we can talk about the other 2 actions we can perform. You can see that our trick weapon here is becoming filled up with cards. And if I happen to fill up every single slot, it means that I can no longer perform any attacks or any dodges, as both of those combat actions will require me to put a card onto an empty spot on my trick weapon. So, to remedy this, we can instead perform the transform weapon action by discarding a card to our discard pile. I can then clear the board of all cards and then flip my weapon. When each weapon transforms, it will have different actions and abilities on the opposite side of the card. And you can be reminded of what's on the opposite side by seeing what's on the bottom of each trick weapon board. So now we're free to start using up these slots for other combat actions. The last action we can do is go to the Hunter's Dream. This requires you to discard a card. Then you'll take your hunter and put them onto the Hunter's Dream section of the hunt track. When at the Hunter's Dream, you perform these following steps. First, the hunt track will go up 1 space. Second, we'll refresh our skill deck by taking all the cards in our discard pile, in our deck, in our hand, and on our trick weapon, and taking them all together. Then we'll refresh our health, bringing us back to full, and even refreshing our firearm. Lastly, we'll take any blood echoes and discard them, and for each one discarded in this way, we'll buy 1 upgrade from the Hunter's Dream. Whenever you purchase an upgrade, take the card and immediately replace it. It should be noted that you must purchase upgrades if you have Blood Echoes. You cannot choose to not spend your Blood Echoes. Then, if you want to add these cards into your deck, you must take out an equal number of cards so that your deck will always be 12 cards. So, even though you had to purchase some upgrades, let's just say for whatever reason you really don't want them, you don't have to add it in your deck. You can simply decide that the 12 cards that you currently have are good enough. And therefore, any cards that are either swapped out or not put into your deck will then be discarded. But it's a good idea to make sure your deck is filled with upgraded cards. But the composition of your deck is completely up to you. Your strategy might be to have more skill cards or strength cards. It's a matter of your preference, your playstyle, and your build. Once you decide which card you want to keep in your deck, take that deck, shuffle it, and place it off to the side. Your hunter will return to the game board at the start of your next turn. When a hunter returns from the dream at the start of their turn, they can place their hunter back down on any lamp space currently revealed. I should also note, if your hunter ever dies because they take too much damage, they will go to the hunt's dream involuntarily, performing all the same steps that we just did. However, they will lose their Blood Echoes before they do anything else, meaning that they won't have any Blood Echoes to spend to upgrade cards. And unlike in the video game, when you lose Blood Echoes, you can't go back and get them. They are permanently gone. So, once every hunter has performed their turn, and every monster is activated after each hunter's turn, the round is over, and at the start of a new round, we will move our tracker up. And at the start of a new round, every hunter has the option to discard cards from their hand, and then redraw back up to 3. You also notice these red spots on the hunt track. These are reset points. Let me describe what happens when one of these points is reached. When the reset point on the hunt track is reached, the first thing we'll do is remove all non-boss enemies from the board. Then we'll replenish any missing consumable tokens on the board. Then we'll respawn any monsters that are specific to any missions currently out on the table, and then respawn normal monsters back to their respawn points. Boss monsters, as I mentioned, aren't removed during resets. However, they will be fully healed. Boss monsters are like monsters with a bit of a spin on normal monster rules. First off, they have monster cards that look like this, which are typically double-sided, showing a phase 1 and a phase 2. They will also have a different amount of health based on the number of players. Now here we have a phase 1 cleric beast. When the hunters perform X amount of damage onto the cleric beast, that cleric beast will then shift to phase 2. And that boss's health will refresh back to full based on the number of players. But this isn't just important because it shows how much health the monster has, but the monster will have different behavior decks based on which phase it's in. So naturally, when a boss is out on the board, they need to have their appropriate deck available based on their phase. Now when the reset point happens, they will be fully healed, but they'll be fully healed based on the phase they're in. So, if we manage to get the cleric beast to phase 2, they will simply heal back to their full value of phase 2. They won't go back to phase 1. So timing the damage the players do to enemies and when these reset points happen is another crucial point of strategy in the game. There's no point doing damage to an enemy if it's just going to respawn and be fully healed effectively. But I also can't stress enough to pay attention to any cards that appear in the campaign deck, as they will provide very specific rules that override everything that I've just described. And again, without getting into any spoilers, let's talk about some of the more common things you might see come out of this deck. For example, we mentioned here that our mission card will have some prerequisites to reveal a card. It might say something like end a move on a tile or end a move on a space. A tile is the entire tile, and a space is a specific space. But when it's referring to a specific space of a tile, for instance, the graveyard space is a space that has the word graveyard in it. So if a card told me that I needed to land in the graveyard space or interact with something on the graveyard space, I would need to specifically be in this middle space that has the name. However, if it just said I needed to end a move on the graveyard tile, I just need to be on any space on the entire tile. Now, a common thing that we'll see are fog gates. These are usually insight missions that will bring in a special type of enemy, whether it's a buffed up version of the enemies that we've already seen or something else entirely different. The steps are usually the same. First, we'll need to take fog gate tokens and place them so that they cover every exit of that tile. Then it might ask us to spawn a specific type of enemy onto the tile on a specific space. So we'll find that monster's relevant card, randomly determine which facing it is on, and place it beside our hunt board. Then any monsters not referred to in the mission that place these fog gates are removed. These fog gates prevent hunters from leaving the space, monsters leaving the space, or other monsters coming into the space. Hunters can still walk in, they just can't leave. It should also be worth noted that if these fog gates appear around, say, a tile that has a lamp, then we'll need to take a destroyed lamp token and place it onto that space to show that this lamp cannot be used for a hunter who is, say, in the dream, to teleport back into. They need to go to another lamp and then make their way into the fog gates. But take careful note here of the central lamp that says we can interact with that lamp to teleport into a fog gate. It is a useful way to get where you need to be quickly. Hunters inside fog gates are completely ignored by monsters outside of them. So during the enemy's activation, this monster, although it is one tile away from any of the acting hunters, it will not try to go one space towards them, as it is completely ignoring them because they're inside fog gates. Once the monster specified by the mission that brought about the fog gates is slain, the fog gates are removed and any broken lamps are repaired. And now that tile acts as normal moving forward. The last thing I'll mention are about those rewards we talked about earlier. There are specifically two types of rewards I want to refer to. There are hunter tools and carol runes. The difference between the two is not important, but they are useful items or abilities that provide great bonuses for hunters. The only caveat is that you can have only 2 hunter tools and 2 carol runes per hunter. But whenever you receive them, you'll have them with the ready side face up and be able to use them as described on the card. If something says it can be used on the hunter's turn, you can use it during your turn. When you perform that action, you simply take that card and flip it face down, meaning that it is exhausted. And you'll get this back when you go to the hunter's dream, where you can then refresh it. Certain tools trigger on kill. Certain tools are used specifically on attack, which means you must declare that you are using this card as you're declaring your attack. But let's say, for example, we have our purple hunter here who has 2 carol runes and 1 hunter tool, and our green hunter who has 2 hunter tools. Let's say we complete a mission that gives us a new carol rune, and we decide that it's perfect for the purple player. The purple player, however, has reached the maximum limit of 2 carol runes, but they can still take this rune. However, they must give away one of their runes. So they'll give that to the green player, which will allow them to take the new reward. If no player wants the reward, then they can set it off to the side into an effective backpack. However, you can't take items from the backpack unless you're between chapters. So you must make the best out of what you have. but because these items refresh, unlike consumables, they are incredibly valuable. It is possible to also receive firearms as a reward, and it works in the very same way. And I'll just say that it might be a good idea to replace your firearm at some point, as most standard firearms stagger basic monster actions. However, bosses don't technically perform basic actions. All of their cards are unique and therefore can't be staggered by a simple firearm. But that's how you play Bloodborne, the board game. After you complete a mission, the table can decide whether or not they want to save their current campaign or proceed immediately on to the next chapter. If you proceed to the next chapter, you perform the entire setup as I did at the very beginning of the video. The only difference is all players will get to keep their upgraded stat deck and any consumables or rewards they have accumulated along the way. If you want to save your campaign, simply take all of these, put them somewhere safe, as well as any completed insight cards you have acquired, as you might need them in future chapters. With all the hunters, upgrades, and rewards set off to the side, you can resume a campaign by setting up the next chapter later. But that's it. Those are all the basics to Bloodborne, the board game. There's really not much else I can say, as each campaign will have very specific rules that mix up everything I've just described. But with these basics, you should have enough to get you started. Just be sure to read each card carefully and follow them to the letter. If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below. I'll also put a link to the Bloodborne FAQ thread on Board Game Geek in the description. Because there are so many very unique interactions in this game, the FAQ thread has gotten pretty big, even though this game just came out. But if you enjoyed this tutorial and want to see more tutorials like this, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel to support the future release of more videos. And you better believe if you want to see some Bloodborne the board game content, then subscribe to the channel, slap the bell around to be notified when those videos come out. Bloodborne is one of my favorite games and is actually one of the only PS4 games I have completely platinumed. So I think I know a thing or two about Bloodborne. But that's all for now. Thanks for watching.